If intelligence alone won poker tournaments, professors would dominate the World Series of Poker. Nobel Prize winners would sit behind mountains of chips. Engineers would be the most feared players in every high-stakes room. But that's not what happens. In fact, some of the smartest people you'll ever meet never come close to a final table. Meanwhile, players with no advanced degrees, no mathematical background, and no extraordinary IQ quietly build careers worth millions of dollars. Why? Because poker rewards something far more valuable than intelligence. It rewards decision architecture, and almost nobody understands the difference. Imagine two players sitting side by side. Both have studied GTO. Both know pot odds. Both understand ranges. Both have solved thousands of hands. Yet 12 hours later, one is walking toward the final table, while the other is already driving home, wondering what went wrong. The cards weren't the difference. Luck wasn't the difference. Knowledge wasn't even the difference. The difference was invisible. It happened inside the brain long before any chips entered the pot. Here's what elite players eventually discover. Poker isn't a game of making brilliant decisions. It's a game of preventing small mistakes from quietly multiplying until they become impossible to recover from. Every tournament is a living system. One rushed call creates emotional tension. That tension slightly changes your attention. Reduced attention affects your range construction. Poor range construction changes future stack depth. Stack depth changes your fold equity. Fold equity changes every decision that follows. One tiny mistake becomes 50, and by the time you bust, you don't even remember where it started. This phenomenon has a name in complexity science: cascade failure. The same principle that causes electrical grids to collapse, financial markets to crash, entire empires to disappear, is quietly eliminating thousands of poker players every single day. Professionals understand something amateurs almost never see. Winning tournaments isn't about producing extraordinary moments. It's about eliminating invisible leaks before they compound. Charlie Munger once said that the highest form of wisdom is avoiding stupidity. Notice he didn't say pursuing brilliance. He said avoiding stupidity. That single sentence contains one of the greatest poker lessons ever spoken. Because brilliance wins hands. Discipline wins tournaments. Over the next few minutes, you're going to discover why highly intelligent players often sabotage themselves. Why average players sometimes outperform people with superior technical knowledge. Why your brain constantly tricks you into making expensive decisions without you realizing it. And most importantly, you'll learn the invisible framework elite tournament players use to survive long after everyone else has exhausted their emotional, mental, and strategic resources. Once you understand this framework, you'll never watch a poker tournament the same way again. Because from this point forward, you won't be studying poker. You'll be studying the operating system behind every great poker player ever created. And that's where the real game begins. If you've made it this far, you've probably realized something uncomfortable. Almost everything the poker world teaches is incomplete. You're told to study ranges, learn GTO, review hands, memorize push-fold charts, understand ICM. All of that is important. But here's the question nobody asks. If everyone has access to the same solvers, the same training sites, the same videos, the same charts, why do the same names keep reaching final tables year after year? Variance cannot explain decades of consistency. Luck doesn't last 20 years. Something else is happening. The answer is hidden inside a concept borrowed from systems engineering. Emergence. Emergence is what happens when simple components interact long enough to create something that never existed in the individual parts. A single neuron cannot think, but billions together create consciousness. A single ant cannot build a colony. Together they create civilizations. One poker skill cannot make you elite, but when emotional control, pattern recognition, probability thinking, future simulation, attention management, adaptability, strategic discipline, and relentless feedback all begin working together, something extraordinary emerges. Judgment, not intelligence. Judgment. This is the invisible quality shared by every legendary poker player. Judgment cannot be downloaded. It cannot be memorized. It cannot be solved. It must be constructed. One decision at a time, one review at a time, one tournament at a time. This is why chasing shortcuts is the slowest path in poker. Every day, thousands of players search YouTube for the perfect bluff frequency, the secret exploit, the winning range, the solver trick. They're searching for isolated answers. Elite players build integrated systems, because isolated knowledge creates isolated improvements. Integrated thinking transforms identity. Imagine trying to build a cathedral. One worker brings bricks, another brings steel, another brings glass. Individually, none of those materials resemble a cathedral. Only when every piece connects according to a master blueprint does something magnificent appear. Your poker game works exactly the same way. Every book you read, every mistake you analyze, every tournament you survive, every emotional battle you win, every difficult fold you make, every disciplined decision you repeat, they're all bricks. Separately, they seem insignificant. Together, they build the player everyone else eventually fears. And here's something remarkable. There comes a moment in every professional's career when improvement stops feeling like effort. Patterns become obvious. Pressure becomes familiar. Complex decisions become quiet. You no longer force discipline. Discipline becomes your default operating system. This is neuroplasticity reaching maturity. This is deliberate practice becoming instinct. This is what mastery actually feels like, not perfection. Clarity. Suddenly you stop trying to impress people with impossible hero calls. You stop chasing miracle bluffs. You stop proving how intelligent you are. Your decisions become simpler, cleaner, more patient. Ironically, that's exactly when your results begin accelerating. Because simplicity is often the final destination of mastery. The amateur believes complexity creates greatness. The master knows complexity must eventually disappear. Watch the greatest players during the final table of any major tournament. They rarely look emotional. They rarely celebrate. They rarely panic. To an outside observer, it almost looks boring. But underneath that calm exterior, thousands of hours of preparation are quietly making every decision for them. This is why confidence cannot be borrowed. It cannot come from motivational speeches or lucky sessions. Real confidence is earned. It is built through evidence. Evidence that you've prepared. Evidence that you've adapted. Evidence that you've become someone capable of handling uncertainty without losing clarity. And once you become that player, something incredible happens. You stop sitting down hoping to win tournaments. You sit down expecting to execute your system. Whether you finish first or bust before the money, your identity remains untouched. Because your confidence is no longer attached to outcomes. It's attached to the person you've become. And that's the moment poker stops being just a card game. It becomes one of the greatest laboratories for building an extraordinary mind. But there is one final lesson. The lesson that separates respected professionals from unforgettable legends. Because in the end, the greatest legacy in poker isn't measured by bracelets. It's measured by the mind you build along the way. Eva para a parte final 9 years from now. You won't remember the biggest pot you ever won. You probably won't remember the incredible bluff that made everyone at the table stare in disbelief. You won't even remember most of the tournaments where everything went your way. But you'll remember the moments that changed how you think forever. The fold that protected your tournament instead of your ego. The session where you finally accepted variance instead of fighting it. The day you stopped asking how can I win this hand? And started asking, how can I become the kind of player who keeps making great decisions for the next 20 years? Because that is the real turning point. The greatest poker players who ever lived didn't become legendary because they discovered secret strategies. They became legendary because they became different people. They built identities that could survive pressure, that could survive uncertainty, that could survive failure. Most players chase information. Very few build transformation. And information without transformation is nothing more than entertainment. You can watch 1,000 strategy videos, read 100 poker books, study every solver on earth. But if your emotional system collapses after one bad beat, if your attention disappears after 6 hours, if your ego refuses to admit uncertainty, if your discipline depends on your mood, then none of that knowledge will ever reach the table when it matters most. Knowledge doesn't win tournaments. Execution comes from identity. Identity is built through systems. That has been the hidden message of this entire video. Every concept we've explored, decision architecture, confirmation bias, predictive processing, Bayesian thinking, future game simulation, pattern recognition, feedback loops, optionality, deliberate practice. They're not separate ideas. They're pieces of the same operating system, an operating system designed for one purpose: to help you become impossible to break under pressure. Think about the players you admire the most, not because they won one tournament, but because they kept winning for years. Their greatest achievement wasn't collecting trophies. It was becoming the same disciplined decision-maker regardless of whether they were chip leader or the shortest stack at the table, whether they had just doubled up or suffered the worst bad beat of the year. That consistency is what creates greatness. And here's something most people never realize. Poker eventually gives everyone exactly what they deserve. Not today, not next week, maybe not even this year. Variance can delay reality, but it cannot erase it. Eventually, your bankroll reflects your habits. Your results reflect your decisions. Your confidence reflects your preparation. And your future reflects the person you repeatedly choose to become. That's why poker is so brutally honest. The table exposes what everyday life often hides. It reveals your patience, your discipline, your emotional control, your courage, your humility. It reveals your thinking. And once you understand that, every tournament becomes something much bigger than a competition. It becomes a mirror showing you exactly who you are when uncertainty arrives. The beautiful part is this: mirrors don't judge, they simply reflect. And reflections can change. Every disciplined fold changes the reflection. Every emotional victory changes the reflection. Every honest review changes the reflection. Every hour of deliberate practice changes the reflection. One day, without even noticing, you'll sit down at a table and realize something extraordinary. The situations that once terrified you now feel familiar. The decisions that once seemed impossible now feel obvious. The pressure that once controlled you has become fuel. Not because poker became easier, because you became stronger. That is the real prize. Far greater than any trophy. Far greater than any bracelet. Far greater than any single tournament victory. If today's lesson changed the way you see poker, imagine what happens when you begin applying these principles every single day. That's exactly why we created Collection 2. Not as another set of poker ebooks, but as a complete mental framework for serious players who want to think differently, compete differently, and build an edge that lasts for decades. Inside, you'll find advanced decision models, psychological protocols, practical frameworks, and deep strategic concepts that simply don't exist in conventional poker training. If you're ready to stop collecting information and start building the mind that reaches final tables consistently, you'll find the link in the pinned comment below. And if this video challenged the way you think, subscribe to Mind of a Grinder. Because this channel was never created to teach you how to play another hand. It was created to help you build the mind that other players spend their entire careers trying to understand. I'll see you in the next lesson. And remember, the strongest player at the table isn't always the one holding the best cards. It's the one who has spent years building the strongest mind.